Well, hello everybody. Welcome into this Adobe Photoshop tutorial brought to you, as always, by tutvid.com. You saw the title up there, right? We're talking about 3D today, particularly 10 things or 10 steps that you probably should go through and know a little something about. And just 10 things that are going to get you up to speed in terms of using 3D in Photoshop today. Help get over the scary feeling or the I don't know what the heck's going on in there kind of feeling. You know, all that kind of stuff. That's just no fun. Now, before we get going, if you enjoy this tutorial, well, you can go ahead and hit the like button now, but you should probably wait and see if it's any good. But at some point, hit the like button for this tutorial if you enjoyed. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you never miss another one of these Photoshop tutorials in the future. And if you really love the tutorial and you want to support what we're doing here at tutvid.com, we're moving into a big, beautiful new studio. Well, I mean, maybe not big, but a beautiful new studio. And it's going to be amazing. And to continue supporting the growth of the channel, everything that's going on here, and all the exciting new stuff that personally I'm super fired up about, but we need to pay for everything. Pick up my Photoshop course. This Photoshop course, it's like an advanced Photoshop course. If you're a graphic designer, there's a load of stuff in there you're going to love, creating all sorts of different graphics and icons and just more stuff than I can even remember right here. But if you click on that link that appeared in the top corner of the video, it's going to take you to a page where you can look over everything. You can see all the videos that are involved. It's like 7 or 9 hours worth of content. All types of stuff that you're absolutely going to love, and it helps support what we do here on the channel, helps me keep cranking out these videos, and for that, of course, I thank you very much, as always. Without further ado, let's jump into this video. All right, so 10 things you need to know about before you get started or as you're getting started in Photoshop, particularly with 3D. Now, first and foremost, and the number one thing is, hey, can I even create stuff in 3D in Photoshop? Well, number one, if you're using Photoshop CS6, you need to have Photoshop Extended. If you have Photoshop CC, everything is wrapped into one beautiful little package. Now, here's a little speed bump, if you will. Back in late 2012, Adobe released a Photoshop CC update. I think it was 13.1 or 13.0.1 or something. I don't know. I can't keep track of all the numbers. It was late 2012 in which Adobe started saying, if your computer does not meet X, Y, and Z standards, despite the fact that you're paying for full CC, you're just not going to be able to use the 3D stuff. So let's look at some of those requirements right here, right now. Ooh, look at this. This is the fun stuff, right? We just have regular old system requirements, but look at this. There's a little footnote snuck in down here. 3D features are disabled on 32-bit platforms. So if your operating system is not 64-bit, 32-bit platforms, and on computers having less than 512 megabytes of VRAM or video RAM, you may need a dedicated graphics card, is basically what this is saying, with more than 512 megabytes of VRAM. Video features are not supported on 32-bit Windows systems. So Windows, you're out in the cold when it comes to video. We don't care about video, though, right now. Also, down here, look at this graphics processor requirements. Features requiring the graphics processor, the GPU, the video card, GPU. If your graphics processor is unsupported or its driver is defective, the following Photoshop features won't work. Well, it's at the top of the list, 3D. So you may want to come to this website here. I will throw this link in the description to this video so you can check this out. Now, this is just right here today when I'm recording this video. Presumably in a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, these system requirements will change, and everything about Photoshop will change as well. So you want to make sure that before you get started with 3D in Photoshop, you can actually create 3D stuff in Photoshop, and Photoshop will allow you to create stuff in 3D in Photoshop. So next up, we have the 3D workspace. Now, we can just come up here to our workspaces, drop that menu, and choose 3D, and the whole workspace changes. Now, we get this cool 3D objects layers panel. We have a regular layers panel. We've got the properties panel, which opens up to be a lot larger. You'll see why this becomes a lot larger in a little bit. But the important thing about 3D Workspace is when you're in 3D Workspace, you're going to be able to actively grab and adjust and rotate and move your 3D objects. So if you render or finish your 3D project and you don't want to accidentally mess things up or have to re-render a project, and rendering can take a long time, you want to make sure that you get out of your 3D workspace and don't mess around on 3D layers. So you do that up here under Workspaces, or of course Window Workspace, and just get out of 3D. I have a tutvid workspace. That's me. You can create a custom workspace or go with the good old Essentials workspace. So getting in and out of the 3D workspace is pretty important. Now let's talk about creating a simple 3D object from scratch. I'm going to shut off this 3D text layer. Beautiful graphics, right? Just some nice black 3D text. I'm going to go up to my 3D panel here. And you can see we've really got some sparse options here. New 3D layer from file, where we could load a file, get more content, which will take us out to a website where we can download some 3D content. A lot of the good stuff, or virtually all the good stuff, you got to pay for. And then all this stuff that's grayed out. There's really one simple thing we can do here, and that's let's just create a new layer, something that's not the locked background layer. Let's create a new layer. Let's call this 3D object. I don't know. We don't even know what we're creating yet. Let's go back to the 3D drop-down menu. Hey, look, some new stuff opened up. New 3D extrusion from selected layer. Now, there's nothing on the selected layer, so not much is really going to happen there. I'm more interested in this new mesh from layer. We'll talk about postcards in a little bit. Depth maps, we're not really going to get to. The 3D features in Photoshop are so deep. There's so much here. It's really a powerful feature set, and it's really not even a full-fledged 3D editor, you know, like the big bad boy 3D editors. But a lot of impressive tools here. Let's look at the mesh presets. We got all this cool stuff. Cone, cube wrap, cube, cylinder, donut. Let's create a donut here just because, hey, who doesn't love donuts? And look at this. Photoshop says, hey, look, you're about to create a 3D layer. And also, would you like to switch to the 3D workspace? Well, you know what, Photoshop? Yes, I would, because we're about to go to town creating some 3D stuff. And look at this. We've created a 3D blob. It really it doesn't look like too much like a donut here. But if I rotate my view, I can tell, yep, that's definitely a donut. We're going to talk about this 3D view thing in just a second. For now, I'm going to right-click on my little widget here and just return to my default view mode. And before we really go any further, guys, I want to remind you, like I mentioned in the open, you can pick up a copy of my course all about advanced Photoshop stuff. If you're a graphic designer, you're absolutely going to love it. If you're not interested in picking up the course, that's why I keep this little sort of reminder super short. Click the link if you're interested. Otherwise, let's get back to the tutorial. All right. So like I mentioned, the properties panel really fills out with a lot of stuff when we get here into the 3D workspace and we actually have a 3D object. Just for the sake of it, let's go and look at our layers panel. You can see that this 3D object is a 3D layer. It's got that 3D cube there. We can see it's displaying like something called textures and diffuse and image-based light and all this jargon and stuff. We're not going to worry about any of that stuff right now. We're going basic here. Let's learn about this a little bit. So here in the 3D panel, we have some interesting things. We have an environment option. You can see here where this looks, well, that looks really weird. We're not going to mess with the environment too much here. We have the scene options. You can see all these different options that have to do with the scene. We have a current view mode. Now, the cool thing about current view is when you're working with the 3D camera, you're not moving the object. Watch the ground plane here, right? All of this grid. When I rotate my view mode, I'm not moving the ground. I'm just changing the way I'm looking at it. Imagine I'm a guy on the ground right here with a jetpack, and I lift off. Whoops, I just right-clicked. And I lift off. I would have this view of the cone. I haven't moved the cone. My position with respect to the cone has changed, and that's exactly what's happening here. If I've got a car or something and I'm driving around this donut, right? The donut's not actually moving. I'm moving in the car. My position with respect to the donut is changing, okay? So that's something to remember. Now, if we use this little widget down here, we can right-click on that, and we can quickly get to any number of different views of our object. We can look at it from the top down. Look at that. Boom. That's your donut from the top down. We say, you know what? We want to go back to the default viewpoint, which is kind of looking at it straight on. We can choose default, and we're back to our default viewpoint. That is super helpful. Right-click and move around or change to a different viewpoint, because a lot of times it can be very difficult. If you navigate to this position, you say, ooh, I want to get back to that ground plane view mode. It can be a pain in the neck to get back to exactly where you were. Simply right-click, default, bam. You're right back to your initial default viewpoint to check out your 3D object however you wish. Moving down the 3D panel, we have our actual donut we can select. And now what's happened is all of our move tools have changed. So if I click and drag, I'm not changing my viewpoint. Look at this. I'm moving the actual 3D object now. So as I do this, I stay still and the 3D object moves, right? So I can do that. I can use the move tool here to move it around in my scene. I can move it closer to me. I can move it further away. I can do whatever I want with it. I'm going to undo a bunch of times here to just bring my 3D shape back to the way it was. Now up here on our properties panel, you can see that we can do stuff like, hey, cast shadows or have it not cast shadows. So, or catch shadows, I'm sorry, and cast shadows as well. And you can see the little shadow around the base of our donut goes away. So that's kind of cool. We also can choose coordinates coordinates, and coordinates are sort of a manual way to move your object around. So you can move it along the X, Y, and Z axis. So if I want to change this along the Z axis, I can maybe set this to 1,000, right? And it's going to sort of shift it closer to me. Or I can go -1,000 to push it away from me, or I can go -10,000 to really push it away from me. So a lot of cool stuff you can do there if you know precisely, like, oh, I need to rotate this, 100 degrees along the Y axis. Well, that's not. I'm not going to do 100 there. Let's undo that real quick. Let's reset that. Go back to our coordinates, and let's say let's rotate it along the X. This might be a little bit easier here, and let's go like 75 degrees along the X axis. You can see how it just flips the donut up. So if you know you have a certain degree amount that you're looking to set this, you can very easily do that here in your coordinates section of the properties panel. Now, that's when you have the donut selected. If you want to change how you're looking at the donut, again, you want to go back and choose your current view option. And I just really want to stress this because working with your current view versus the other objects in the 3D panel is really, really important. You can also adjust the light. So when you create a 3D object, you get one infinite light, and you can drag this light, and you can change the way that the light is cast in your scene. You can make the light blast straight into your object, more straight downward on your object. You can straight up move the entire light. Now you see when I deselected that light, where'd the light go? Well, if we look here at a 3D layer, I've actually selected current view. I want to go back to my light. I can grab and move the whole light if I want. There's all kinds of things I can do here. Oh, by the way, we can come down here to the bottom of the 3D layer and we can create new lights. We can add a new infinite light. We can add a point light or a spotlight. You can play around with those. We're not really going to get into all them in this tutorial, but I can grab a second infinite light and I can really blast the living daylights out of the top of my donut. Let's go to current view and let's look at the top of this. So make sure we've got all these different 3D tools up here in terms of moving and looking at our objects differently. So let's just look at the top of our donut. We can see it's very, very bright white. The bottom is very dark because there's no light coming up through the ground. So let's just right click here on our little widget doodad and go back to our default view mode. I don't like that second infinite light, so I'm going to select it and just click the garbage can icon here. Get rid of that second light. Let's just keep our initial infinite light. So there's so much you can do here in the 3D panel, and the really important thing is differentiating between when you're changing how you're looking at your object, right? Working with that 3D camera, as it's called, or working with the actual 3D object. So let's go back to our layers panel here. I'm going to delete this 3D object. I'm just going to select that layer, click on the garbage can, boom, it's gone. We're still in our 3D workspace. That's fine, because let's go ahead and create this text, this 3D text, to actual 3D. You can use this technique with text layers, with shape layers, any object you have, really. We're going to go 3D, new 3D extrusion from selected layer. Hit OK, and you can see that Photoshop has created this three-dimensional text from our little 3D flat text in Photoshop. We're back in that 3D view mode. We have all this crazy stuff going on. We can change the extrusion depth here. In this case, we didn't have this with the donut, but the extrusion depth, if I right-click on this and I go and look at the left side of the text, you can see this is just the face of the text is over here. The extrusion is the length of this. So right now it's 681. If I shorten it to like 250, you can see the extrusion is just much less. It's much more narrow, or it doesn't go as deep or as far back, if you will. Let's right-click and return to our default viewpoint, and we can see we still have our 3D text looking the way it looks. So now, what if we want to change the color of this 3D text? What if we want to make it like red or something like that? Well, here in something like this 3D text, because we have this extrusion, we have a bunch of different what are called textures or materials here. So we've got our 3D front inflation material. This is the actual front material, the very front face. If this was a neon light fixture, this is the piece that goes on the front. We could select it. We could just come up here. We could choose any number of presets, right? We go with like this gold preset, and you can see there now it says gold craziness. We could go with like a different kind of gold with texture. Let's just go with that just for the sake of it. We can change the color of it, but you can see up here diffuse orange with these presets. Getting into changing them is a little bit more complicated, so I'm not going to mess around with that here. We're going to leave it the way it is. But let's say we want to make the sides a different color. Well, we have this 3D front bevel option, and that is for when we actually add a little 3D bevel to the text, which we don't have right now, so this isn't really going to do anything for us. We have our extrusion, which is the actual sides, and then there's the bevel back if we add a bevel to the back of the text, and also if we want to add something to the back of this text itself. So the back and back bevel, though adding textures to those, we're not really going to use it for our text, because the 3D text at the end of the day is going to end up being more of like a 2D application. People are going to see it in a 2D environment. But if you're creating a real deal 3D environment where the back of an object needs to have textures, you're building some like shape or a little house or something, something, you have the ability to add textures and color and everything to all these different layers. So let's go to our extrusion material level here, and I'm just going to go with diffuse, and I'm going to change the color here to like red. So I'm going to hit OK, and you can see here we have this red diffusion. Now, the reason it looks all dark up here is just because of where our infinity light is. We're casting some heavy shadows, and that's fine. We could always go to our infinity light, and we could say, hey, look, no shadow. And you can see, while the shadow on the ground goes away, we could take away some of that light intensity, but that's going to really kill off some of what's going on with our text. But probably the easiest way to just quickly go in and change that is come in here into the actual 3D extrusion material and go to the illumination option here, and we could just make this like a darker red, something like that. So it's still going to fit within our color scheme here. And we do still want there to be a little bit of a color difference there. Go ahead and hit OK with that. And we've got our 3D text. I actually think what I'm going to do is come in here and we will choose a preset. We'll just go with like this gold preset to give our extrusion a similar color to the front, so at least it looks, kind of like it belongs. Now, one more time, I just want to go over moving this object. So if we want to move this object, remember we have to differentiate between the 3D object and the camera. Now, I didn't really spend much time on these tools up here earlier. You can see it says 3D mode, and we've got these tools. If I hover over the tools, you can see the first one is going to give me a tooltip, orbit the 3D camera. Roll the 3D camera, pan the 3D camera, slide the 3D camera, or zoom the 3D camera. But check this out. We've even selected, we've selected, a texture inside of our 3D object. But if we actually explicitly select the 3D object, look at what these change to. Rotate the 3D object. Roll the 3D object. We're no longer talking about the 3D camera. We're talking about moving or zooming or scaling, in this case, the 3D object. I select this tool, and we scale up our 3D object, or we scale down our 3D object. And look at that. Look at how it's lifting off the ground. See how it's sort of floating in midair now? That's pretty cool. We can select that 3D object, and we can do more manual movements. This widget here, you can use this to, rotate it as well. It can be kind of tricky using this and getting exactly where you want to be in terms of like, all right there is where I want my text to be. The more you play around with it, the more you're going to be able to kind of figure out what it does and how it works. But a lot of times, honestly, when you select this 3D object, it's really, really simple to just come up here to the coordinates icon in the properties panel and do things a little manually. Now, in this case, I don't know that I really want to change this too much. Maybe I want to sort of pitch it forward or backward one or the other way. So let's just pitch it backward a little bit like this. But then I don't want it to be up off the ground like this. I want it to be right on the ground. So look at this. There's a move to ground button. We can go ahead and hit that, and it's going to drop this guy right down so it's sitting right on the ground exactly perfectly as a 3D object should be. So moving objects around by numbers is extremely helpful. It's so useful. It's great to go in and do when you're getting frustrated and you just can't quite figure out why your 3D object's not sitting exactly where it needs to be, or you want to make sure that there's absolutely no pitch on it at all. Make sure that X there would be set to, well, I'm sorry, not the X. We'll set that back to 50. We want to make sure that our rotation X here is not set to 10 degrees, but 0, and we have just 3D text looking straight on as though it's been planted on the ground right in front of where we're looking. So let's drag in, or well, we'll just open up an image file here. I'm going to jump out to my Finder. I'm going to right click on this image here. Let's just go open with Photoshop, and it's going to open up this photo of London here, and I'm going to size it down. I'm going to make it quite a bit smaller just so we don't have any issues in terms of a massive file size bogging down my system or anything. I'm going to go 1400 by 787 here. Go ahead and hit OK. And one of the things we can do with a flat image like this, we're still in 3D view mode here. I'm just going to right click and choose layer from background just to unlock this real quick. And then we'll right click and we're going to convert this not to new 3D extrusion from selected layer, but rather let's convert it to a 3D postcard. So a 3D postcard is a great way to take a very much 2D object and move it into 3D space. You can use a postcard to take a 2D object like this and move it into 3D space and allow it to interact with other 3D objects with which you're working. You can just do something like I can select this. Let's go to our 3D panel. There it is right there, layer 0 mesh. And I can do something like just rotate the image any which way I want in 3D space. So let's say I'm like, yeah, I want it to look like an image just hanging out in actual 3D space just like that. Then I'll take my camera here and we'll zoom the camera out a little bit. Whoops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to zoom the camera out. Whoop, there we go. And there we go. It's just like we have an image just sitting in 3D space, right? I'll move my camera around a little bit. There we go. We adjust it just like that. And that's exactly what I want. I can go back and I can see here on my layers panel that it's actually doing the stuff to this 3D layer. And if I get out of 3D workspace here, go back to like, I don't know, my TutVid workspace. The image is what it is. I create a new layer here. And, you know, it's just an image that's been rotated actually in 3D space. So 3D Postcard can be really useful, but not only can it be useful there, it can also be useful in an instance like this with our text. And I actually just did a tutorial very similar to this, but we're going to just sort of do a very, very quick recreation. I'm going to create a new layer underneath my 3D text, and I'm going to fill this layer. Let's just fill it with black. Let's go Edit, Fill. You know what, actually, let's fill it with 50% gray. We're going to go Contents 50% gray, hit OK, and I'm going to right-click on this layer, and I'm going to choose to convert it to a postcard. It's going to say, hey, look, you're going to switch to a 3D layer. You're going to switch to 3D workspace. Yep, cool, no problemo. And what you can do is we now have an actual 3D object, the 3D text, and the postcard is an actual 3D object as well, but it's more or less a 2D layer on like a 3D plane or a 3D plane with 3D properties, something like that. I can't remember what the technical description is, but it's something like that. It's a 2D object that's being brought into 3D space. We can take these two 3D layers, select them both. So select the bottom layer, Command or hold down your Shift key and click on the top layer, and then we just go 3D, merge 3D layers. And you might think, oh no, a lot of damage, what's going on? But look at that, it's still a 3D layer. It looks a little funky now, but that's because if we go back to our 3D panel here, we have a couple things. We've got this 3D text, but we also have this 3D mesh, which is our background. So I'm going to go to my current view, and let's just right click on this and choose to view this from the left. You can see that our text is actually kind of sticking like through the background. Let me just rotate my camera a little bit. You see that? And the background is just a very thin, it's a 2D image that's in 3D space, right? It's just a thin sliver in there, and our 3D text is actually punching through it. Well, we can do something like select the 3D mesh over here in our 3D panel, hold down our Control key, and also select the other 3D object, the text, and use like this align to the left edge option up just to the basic move tool, and it's going to align that postcard to the very base of our 3D text. Then we can simply right-click on our view over here, go back to default view mode, and here we are, back where we are. Now you might say, hey, look, whoa, what happened to the background? Why is there a white border? Well, remember, in real life, in 3D space, in actuality, when something moves a little bit further away from you, it appears a little bit smaller. And this background just moved a little further away from us. So let's go to a current view, and we'll just zoom our 3D camera in a little bit. So we'll grab this tool up here to just zoom the 3D camera, and let's just zoom it in just like that until, you know, everything is just filled with gray again. Now, once you've done something like this, you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal? I don't understand what's so great about this. Well, what's going to be cool about this is when we render this, and this is going to be the next, or the last, I should say, of our 10 steps to getting started with 3D and Photoshop. When we render this object out, it's going to now be able to interact with this background, with this gray background. Yellow color will be reflected onto this gray background. It's going to just work as though it's one full 3D scene. So how do we render this? Well, you can render at any time by hitting this little render icon right here, or you can go up here to 3D, render 3D layer, right? You can also, or it's important, I should say, to go to the Photoshop preferences. This is Photoshop preferences 3D, or on the Windows it'd be Edit Preferences 3D. And you have this option over here, Ray Tracer. The higher quality your ray tracer threshold is, the less grain there's going to be in the final render. But you start putting this up as high as it goes, you know, to like, let's say we put a ray tracer at 10. With my computer, even to render this small file would probably take 45 minutes. No kidding. That's just what it would take with your ray trace set to 10. So we'll knock this down to like 4 to try to blast out this. I don't really care about it being like crazy high quality right now. We're just doing this as an example. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now I would have to render this object. So I'm going to go 3D, render 3D layer, and I'm going to speed this tutorial up now. I'm going to let this bad boy render, and you're already beginning to see how the yellow color and light is going to be reflected onto the gray poster background that we created to be around this text. And oh, by the way, before I speed it up, or maybe I'm already speeding it up while I talk over this, you're going to get this little window down here at the bottom, sort of the bottom left part of your screen. that is a little tooltip pop-up window that's going to say, hey, look, render progress can be found below, and eventually it'll populate and tell you, hey, like 6 minutes to go or something. And at any point, you can click the escape key to cancel the render. And it's not going to destroy all of the progress. It's just simply going to stop the render where it is at whatever quality it is. So with all of this grain that you see, or all the grain there was at the very beginning of this render, we could just stop that render dead in its tracks right there and say, ooh, that's not what I'm looking for. I need to go back and tweak it and adjust the colors a little bit more, or adjust the positioning a little bit more, or whatever it may be. You can do any of that very, very quickly and easily. We'll just let this render finish real quick and take a look at the final finished result. And as you can see here, if we just zoom in and take a look, you can see it's pretty grainy. But, it rendered relatively quickly. It only took a couple minutes to render this file out. But, it's definitely not finished quality, but we can definitely tell how the 3D object is shadowing and blending with this 3D postcard we created. It's a totally different effect than if we just rendered this 3D object without a postcard. So sometimes you might want this effect, like your 3D object, this 3D text or a shelf or whatever it is you're creating looks like it's actually mounted in 3D space. If I go to my layers, I create a new layer here, and we do whatever with it. We throw in a adjustment above it. Let's go back to my TutVid workspace, and we throw, we throw a gradient map over it or something, and give it one of these crazy colors, and say like, hey, set this to soft light instead, and then we get this, all these color effects. We could do something simple like that, and it's going to work with the 3D layer, as you can see, and we're not going and tweaking and adjusting and messing up the 3D layer to the point where we have to re-render it. Now, if we have rendered it and we want to go and play with the 3D layer more, well, let's jump back into 3D space so we can get to our 3D panel. Go back to the 3D panel. I can select my 3D text, and let's try something here. Let's move the text. So I'm going to actually move the text like up kind of to the middle a little bit more, and I'm going to size it up. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to scroll it upward a little bit. And I think I want to try to actually rotate this a little bit, kind of like that. I want it to make it, I want this to look like the I want to call it a word. I don't know that it's quite a word. The word 3D, if you will, is coming out of the background, is sort of stuck into the background and coming out of it. So let's choose our camera, change the current view here, and let's just rotate this a little sideways and see kind of what it looks like. Right? It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? You can see how the 3D is sticking out or just straight up going through our background poster. And this is going to look very interesting when we mess around and render this. So let's set this back to the default, and we may have to zoom our camera, so we can go to current view camera. We're going to zoom this guy back in a little bit. Voila, just like that. And let's choose to render this out. And I'm going to speed this up so we can just race right through it and see what it looks like when it's finished, completed, done. Yeah, you can see once it wraps up its rendering just kind of what it looks like. It's pretty neat, right? Just looks like your 3D text. You can obviously see the shadow is different where it's popped up off the ground as opposed to where it's punching through this gray wall that we have it set against. And it's just really neat. You can have a lot of fun with the 3D stuff. There's a lot of really cool, really practical stuff you can do with 3D. It's definitely something that you shouldn't be sleeping on, something you shouldn't be ignoring. It's really just a pretty powerful feature set here in Photoshop, and really, now that we've talked about rendering and how that works a little bit, saving out a 3D object. How do you save one so you can edit it later on? Well, number one, save it as a PSD, but you can also go up to 3D, and we want to make sure we have the 3D layer selected. So select the 3D layer. You can go 3D, export the 3D layer, and using this option, you can export it as a number of different 3D file formats, so you can edit it in other applications or maybe send it somewhere that it requires this type of 3D file format. All kinds of things you can do. But definitely save your PSD because you'll always be able to come into the PSD and edit the 3D document that way. So that's really it. It's really a crash course on getting started with 3D. I feel like I was a little bit all over the place, but I really just wanted to go in and yeah, I had 10 ideas of things I wanted to cover in my mind, but really stream of consciousness, go one thing to the next and talk about going from I've never used 3D before to let's get some basic concepts of 3D down. Certainly some of the stuff that really, really helped me begin to grasp how 3D worked in Photoshop and just how much fun you can have with 3D. When it's not frustrating anymore, suddenly it becomes fun and you can do stuff with it, and it doesn't feel so paralyzing and bizarre. And we don't really have great examples in this tutorial, because we mainly covered ideas and techniques. Usually I like to have something that's also visually really beautiful, but I really wanted to just focus on the techniques here today. And I think we did cover the techniques today. So if you learned something, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button down there somewhere below the YouTube player, or if this is on Facebook, hit the like button over there. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button down there so you never miss another Photoshop tutorial in the future. And if you create something amazing with 3D, make sure you share it on Instagram and tag me. I've got my little my Instagram handle that popped out there at Tutvid, Tutvid. I love to see what you guys create as you make stuff with these tutorials. It's so cool. I like to get in there and mix it up, like and comment and chat with you guys on Instagram. It's a bunch of fun. I don't need any kind of elaborate shout out. I'm not interested in that. Just I want to see the stuff that's being made. It's so cool. And that's really it for this one. So for 10 steps, 10 steps to getting started with 3D in Photoshop, that's it. It feels good to get that one off my chest. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.